you, Emily.
Good afternoon and welcome to this first committee meeting of the night. We'll be hearing from the Planning Commission a bit about what census data or how census data will impact the redrawing and potentially redistricting of lines. With that, Dr. Sevier, would you mind introducing whomever is presenting?
Sure, happily. Greg Claxton from the Planning Department's here, and he's going to give you an overview of the process based on the census data. You know, we do that every 10 years, and that results in the shifting of some boundary lines, not for schools, but for zone. I think he'll probably say the same thing, but when you see the word redistricting on the screen, it makes people think that it might be about going to a different school. This is about you potentially serving different sets of constituents.
Thank you for that clarity.
Thank you. Good afternoon, school board members. My name is Greg Claxton. I'm with the Metro Nashville Planning Department. I'm joined tonight by Bob Lehman, our Deputy Director, George Rooker, our Assistant Director of Operations, and Aaron McGowan, new on our team, assisting with the redistricting process. I'm going to talk through the basis for redistricting in Nashville, as well as what the criteria that we use in going through this process. As David said, this is the redistricting of your political boundaries for your school board districts. It's not attendance zones. The Metro Charter assigns the responsibility for evaluating the need for redistricting for both the council member districts as well as the school board districts to the Planning Commission. The primary guidance we have is to prevent substantial underrepresentation of particular areas in the county. The idea is rooted in the idea of one person, one vote for representation. The timing for what we do, the charter assigns us the task of starting our work when we receive updated population counts from the Census Bureau. It gives us 6 months to complete that task and then make a recommendation to the Metro Council, who is responsible for adopting the new district boundaries. As with so much else this year, the census data is behind schedule. Normally that's released in February or March. We're now expecting that in August 16th. You may have heard they released data recently. That was the state level population totals that they used to reapportion U.S. House seats. That's not the data that we use. So far, it looks like we should expect to get the data for Nashville August 16th. We're also mindful, in addition of the 6-month window that we have, of just the practical deadlines of upcoming elections. So we're just mindful that the next school board election is in August of 2022, and the next Metro Council election is in August of 2023. Up on the screen is just a very, very brief overview of the process that we're looking to go through. There's a few points of work for us as well as a few points of work for community engagement. We're hoping to start in the next week or two with public engagement for the process. This is before we get the census data. We want to go ahead and begin letting people know the basics of the redistricting process, why we're doing it, who's responsible, who's involved, and what the criteria are that we use. We also plan to take some preliminary feedback from the public to let them tell us how they perceive their communities, as well as to gather kind of an interest list so that once we have the data, we can get started working with the public immediately. We expect that to go through mid to late August. Like I said, in mid-August, we hope to get the census data. We'll begin our work, kind of processing that, seeing where growth is happening, and then developing initial recommendations. Our hope is to take preliminary maps to the public for both the council districts as well as the school board to the public for public review, probably mid to late September. What we'll be doing at that point is allowing the public to review the maps as well as work with a mapping technician so that if they have a suggestion for an alternate place to draw a line, they can do that and they can get immediate feedback in terms of what that does to the redistricting criteria that we have, primarily population balance. And then if they have a district that goes way over or way under, they can work on that and refine. We think that helps build trust and understanding among the public. It also gives us better input. If that happens in September, we should be able to continue to work with the public throughout October to revise maps and then begin the adoption process at the Metro Council in November, potentially wrapping up by the end of the year or maybe early January. So now I'm going to walk through the basic traditional redistricting criteria that communities throughout the country use. The first and most fundamental is population balance, or the principle of one person, one vote. I've shown on the map up here kind of the current school board districts by how close they are to the countywide growth rate. So the paler districts have had below countywide growth rate, below the rate of countywide growth. The middle districts are about the same as the county as a whole. And then the district in the darkest orange is considerably above the countywide growth rate. So that's one of the factors that we'll be working with as we take a look and begin working once we get the census data. What we're using here are just unofficial estimates from a third party, so it's just to help us think through what are we likely to see once we get the data. The second two factors often go together. They're usually bundled in a pair, being compact and contiguous. Compactness isn't really a matter of size, it's more a matter of shape. So the image on the top is one measure of compactness, where we kind of want to be something like a circle or a square or a rectangle, and not the unusual shape on the far right-hand side. Contiguity is another factor that's sort of fundamental to what we do, and it's essentially looking at, do all parts of the district touch? Can all parts of the district be accessed without leaving the district? You don't want to have a district that covers one part of the county and then skips over a couple of neighborhoods and then picks up somewhere else and they don't touch at all. The fourth factor is what we think of as historical continuity. This is roughly, has a community established a relationship over decades with a particular district that they identify with that district? Another way of thinking of it is the core of the district retained as we draw new district lines? As much as possible, we want to try to maintain that continuity, but we also want the public to understand that districts do change from cycle to cycle. One of the things we'll have on our website is a viewer where people can see how both the Metro Council and the school board districts have changed in every cycle going back to 1963. This is obviously the Metro Council districts, the school board districts are in progress. Next, obviously, we want to comply with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. That gives us the direction to avoid diluting the ability of substantial minority communities to elect the representatives of their choosing. And generally, the guidance is to seek proportionality between representation and the public where it's feasible and warranted. Last, communities of interest is sort of a catch-all for other factors. Generally, considerations could include neighborhood associations, sort of smaller but geographically concentrated ethnic groups, such as a small Kurdish community or groups like that, college students, kind of any way that people kind of think of themselves as having a coherent, distinct set of interests, and they're kind of geographically in one place rather than spread throughout the county. This is part of what we'll be doing our community engagement around, just to find out how do people think of their own communities. And then from prior redistricting cycles, we're also, I think that the guidance we've received in the past is to ensure that for the school board in particular, each district should have a high school. That's the basics of kind of where we're at with the redistricting process. Following tonight's meeting, we would like to reach out to each of you to arrange one-on-one briefings to discuss your districts in particular and go through any more detailed questions that you have about the process. We'll also, like I said, be launching our website and survey soon. Any help you can provide in spreading the word, we'd appreciate. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Go right ahead, free to players. Player Peters, sorry about that.
Player still works. How do you go about educating the public about the new maps, and what's public engagement look like? Not only just general engagement, not only for our board seats, but also for council and house and all that as a planning department.
So one thing just to we continue to emphasize throughout the engagement process is we are only doing the council and the school board. It's distinct from all of the statewide redistricting. What we plan to do is have websites, fact sheets that we can distribute, blurbs that elected officials or community groups can distribute among their members or their constituents, and just try to explain kind of bit by bit who's responsible, what are the factors that we look at, what are the things that we're responding to, like what's the need for redistricting, and just try to make as many ways for people to find out the basic information of the process as we can. Once we have kind of a set of draft districts, it shifts to outreach at community meetings, and then primarily web-based viewers where people can kind of do a slider and see what's the current district, what was draft A, what was draft B, and sort of see the changes as we go version to version. That's something that the department did on a very crunched timeline in 2011. I think they had a month to do it that year. And it seemed to work pretty well, matching community meetings with that online viewer of sort of tracking how the changes go each time.
And it's just kind of a suggestion. I know when I was up for election last time, just be able to explain, particularly to parents, the difference between our cluster districts academically and our political districts. I know I had a parent who was slightly frustrated because she was zoned, her children were school-wise zoned for McGavick, but she was in my political district. And she didn't understand the academic zone districts follows a totally different metric than political districts that we were drawn. So just make sure you just clarify that as you speak. So parents automatically assume if my child is zoned for that high school, I'm automatically voting for that school member that represents that high school. 'Cause that's where our endpoint is, and it's not necessarily political. And I explained it, and she understood it, but did not actually kind of like them understand it's like the political is different from the academic.
Right.
But thank you. But I know I observed the process in 2011, and as a plan department, you guys usually do a really great job of the engagement. Last time was a crunch just because of the council elections, but I hope you continue the same pathway with the updated technology because you really do a good job of being neutral, fair, transparent, but also explain the process well. So I hope you guys will continue to do that.
We are, thank you for that very, very much. We are absolutely kind of learning from what worked last time and hoping to do even more of that. And thank you for the note kind of clarifying the clusters versus the political districts. We'll make sure to include language kind of clarifying how this does not relate to sort of attendance zones. But anything we can do to sort of bring those into alignment, I think that's something we can look at as well.
All right, Mrs. Elrod.
Thank you. So that may have answered my question. My question was, that is a common misconception among parents, and that is not just one or two districts, that's all of the districts, as we all have multiple clusters that we serve. So is there a way that when we look at the high school that is picked, as that's a requirement for each district, that is not just in consideration of what's the closest high school, but what's that cluster look like? Is that a possibility to consider?
So, given the sort of general redistricting principle of respecting communities of interest, I think that's something we can take into account.
Okay.
I will caution, ultimately the population balance criterion winds up driving a lot of things. So we get asked, a lot of times of, well, we know that we've got, 1,000 homes about to be built here. Can you take that into account? And we've got some play there, and similarly to sort of alignment with the cluster boundaries, we've got some play there, but the keeping them within sort of a certain distance of each other really does drive a lot of factors. So it's something we can take a look at, certainly between now and when we get the data to see kind of where there are kind of gaps and that sort of thing. But ultimately it comes down to sort of just that numbers of where the people are and how you keep them together.
Sure. I appreciate that. I don't expect it to be exactly lined up with our zone of attendance, but as much as it can be is as helpful as it can be. And I appreciate y'all getting with us early so we can kind of do our own information to our parent action councils and all that kind of stuff to make sure that they're aware of it and that we just kind of are ahead of the game. So I appreciate y'all being here as well. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Little?
Yeah. And I missed the first part. What is the timeline again as you look to seek to work with the community, work with board and council members?
So generally the timeline that we're looking at is to begin communication and community engagement within the next week or two. We want to kind of run that through the middle to the end of August. Our formal process starts August 16th when we expect to get the census data, and then we'll have some more community engagement in September and October.
Thank you.
Dr. Gentry?
I think to pull the thread on, I think what the ask is in that space is, what are the venues for that communication? What's the mode of communicating, and how can we get the information so we can share with constituencies that we represent as well.
Sure. So we haven't quite set the meeting space yet. Part of the thing that we're looking to do is gauge who we're hearing from the initial community engagement and sort of see, are there gaps of folks that we would like to hear from that we haven't been, and we may be able to target sort of venues based on that. We may also target a little bit based on sort of where does it seem like the most change is happening, just because those are the folks who are probably most in need of sort of working through in person. In terms of sort of the communication materials, we'll certainly be packaging things up for council members and school board members that we can provide to you to sort of drive to where there's greater information, things that you can include in newsletters. If you've got particular suggestions or requests for that, by all means, I'm happy to do what we can.
So the one thing that I would suggest, and it's been mentioned before, about making sure that there's clarity of understanding about what's affecting a school board district and where you would attend, is sort of that, and we've talked about that a lot here on this board, right? That uniformity of language, that common language, because you say attendance zone, and most people don't think about it. They think, where's my school board district, right? Or what's the school that my child is zoned to? So just having just that common language when we talk about differentiating between a school zone and a political zone would be helpful.
Any guidance that y'all can provide in terms of sort of how to nuance that or how to be the most clear, we would very much appreciate, because this is sort of outside of our normal purview.
And to that end, Dr. Severe, maybe once we all get our individual meetings set up, we can maybe work with you and Sean or Mr. Braystead about that language. And it may not necessarily be a one-pager, but some kind of, so we're all using similar language, we're all using the same kind of terminology. That might help just be a good best practice moving forward. So if you're open, I'm sorry, if Dr. Battle is open to that, to us using her staff in that way. All right, Mrs. Masters.
Yeah, I know a lot of voters in my district had confusion about the fact that a council district can span 2 or even 3 school districts. And so I was just wondering about sort of communication to the election commission, because I know, for example, Christian and I share Sean Parker, District 5, Council District 5, and so some of the folks that live there live in my school board District 3, but I wasn't on their ballot. I mean, neither was my opponent, but Christian was, even though that isn't actually her part of that district. So it seemed like they're, like Joan at the election commission, there was a little confusion about that. And so just kind of wondering about how those communications work in leading up to an election, and because that's a lot to wade through if folks, because people don't necessarily know, oh, I need the ballot for school board district, whatever.
Right. Well, that's a whole other part of the process that I didn't get into, of sort of once the new districts are adopted and once the state has completed their work, there's a process of sort of getting all of the precincts and voting locations and all of that sort of lined up and squared up so that the election commission can send out new voter registration cards with all of that information on it. That's something that we're kind of involved with them in more of a support role. But if there's a particular area that has had trouble, I'm happy to sort of let them know. So, as they're working through that, if there's any peculiarities in the past, they can pay special attention to it.
Great.
Mrs. Player-Peters?
A technical question. How many voters are in the school board district, roughly, or residents? Do you have that information? If not, that's okay.
I looked at it recently. I should follow up with that, if that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Is it 45,000?
That's what I was thinking.
I think it's roughly 45,000, or at least it was.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll see. All right, well, I will, at least for transparency's sake, say that when I introduced myself, I asked the question, you know, I have 40 schools in my district, or 38, something, I mean, just like 38 schools. I am asking, and I am going to advocate that some of these schools be spread out a bit more, because it seems to be that my school board district is very much gerrymandered, and it's hard to advocate effectively for 38 districts, especially when many of them serve high populations of disenfranchised families. So sorry, but not sorry. I am going to be asking to not give away some of my schools, because I love all 38 of them, but if I can share the wealth, that's what I'm advocating for. So just want you all to know. Ms. Masters?
Yeah, just to tag on to that, I mean, you have like every magnet school,
I have every
right?
magnet school, I have a number of charter schools, and then I have a number of the zoned and optional schools, so yeah.
So I just wonder if it might make more sense for those to also be geographically distributed, or I don't know, it's kind of, you have like a lot of high schools.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes, I do. So, thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, well, if there are no other questions, we appreciate this. We'll be following up to set up our meetings. All right, we had a committee meeting scheduled, but it looks like we'll be giving everyone back about 29 minutes of your time. We'll begin our full school board meeting at 5 o'clock, beginning with public participation. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to go ahead and reach out now, but if not, I'll see you all at 5 o'clock. Thank you.